Hey! All right, YouTube friends, we're about to do a Totally Football show, rounding up the events of Matchday 7 in the Premier League. When it hits the podcast forum, it'll have an intro on the front, but it doesn't have one yet. So we're just going to crash in with some intros. Here we go then, eh? Thanks for joining us, by the way. Right. Actually, I'm just going to tweak some buttons like I know what I'm doing. Yeah, okay. Sunday, the 6th of October. Hello, listener. Welcome to the Totally Football Show. Here with us today, we've got Tim Spiers.
Hi, James.
Tim, who's very much off the Arsenal fans' Christmas card list.
Oh, no, don't start
Dim
with that.
Tim.
Oh, God. Oh, really?
Are you going to what contentious hot takes are you going to be throwing the Gunners' way this week? Who are you going to offend this time?
It was quite a mild take, I thought.
I thought so too, but sometimes it's nice to just, indulge in a bit of self-righteous indignation because somebody else has a different opinion, no? Have you never done that? I know I have.
I guess so. Do you know, there was quite a Twitter storm.
Frenzy.
Well, I just shut the curtains on the doors and just let it all
Did you
go.
not read every single
No,
word?
there were 1,300 replies to that tweet. I was not going to delve into that.
Seriously?
Yeah.
All right. Matt Davies-Adams is with us. Hello, Matt. Who've you upset this week?
Nobody, but I'm thinking like I might be about to.
The night is still young.
Yeah, slightly reticent
Yeah.
to say anything mildly controversial. Less Timber and more Tim Slur from the Arsenal fans by the sound of it.
No, Matt, you're usually quite passive-aggressive scathing, I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
right,
so I'm looking forward to some of that. And Daniel Storey, who absolutely nobody is upset with. Of course, Daniel. Everyone loves Daniel Storey.
Yeah. Hated, adored, very often ignored. Yeah. Lovely to be here.
Excellent. Well, lovely to have you. Where were you this week as part of your 92 Odyssey, Daniel?
I was at the Western Home Stadium, home of Peterborough United, and then I'm at Bradford City on Monday evening.
Okay. All right. In and around all of that, you've been experiencing the delights of Sunday afternoon in the Premier League, which had highs in the shape of events down at the Amex and very much lows in that Villa-Man United clash. One of two contenders this weekend for worst game of the season, I would say. The other one being Everton-Newcastle. I think Villa-Man United shaded it.
Well, it had the lowest XG of any game in the last 2 seasons.
Apparently.
Really? So statistically speaking, it was the worst for a while.
Okay.
There's a talking point in the Everton-Newcastle game, isn't there?
Yeah.
So I think that probably puts it slightly above Villa-Man United.
I'm with you on that as well. Was it a Champions League a European fixture hangover, do you think, Daniel, at Villa Park? Because you were there for the Bayern Munich game, weren't you?
Yeah, and that was a kind of sort of pulsating evening. I think Erik ten Hag was happy with the 0-0 as a kind of job preservation strategy, and I think Villa ultimately, having not got going in the first 20-25 minutes and Man U controlling the game, I think they just kind of thought, okay, fine, a draw is also fine with us. Shall we all go home at 3 o'clock rather than 4 o'clock, because this is going nowhere, and it went nowhere.
All right. Well, as I say, that was followed by a terrifically entertaining match down at the Amex between Brighton and Tottenham, which provided us with loads to talk about, and we'll be doing that very shortly. First, though, the results around Matchday 7. Saturday began with a narrow 1-0 win for league leaders Liverpool at Crystal Palace. Arsenal and Man City both stayed a point behind. Slot side, Arsenal were 3-1 victors over Saints. Man City had a far less straightforward 3-2 against Fulham. Adama Traore wasting more sitters than Lord Lucan, although possibly we can't say that on anywhere else. Where Brentford Wolves against the Premier League's fastest scorers. Wolves almost held out for the full 90 seconds, that is. But they conceded, 1 minute 16 into that game?
Probably.
Right. 5-2 the final score. 5-3 the final score at the G-Tech. Wolves with 1 point from 7 matches so far, and they face Man City next. Leicester won their first game of the season 1-0 against Bournemouth, and West Ham won their first home game of the season in a resounding fashion as well. 4-1 against Ipswich, and Everton-Newcastle finished goalless. But as Matt was hinting there, Jordan Pickford saving the first half penalty of the returning Anthony Gordon meant that although it was 0-0, Everton very much won on narrative. Sunday, goalless between Villa and Man United. 1-1 for Chelsea and Nottingham Forest. Matt was there. And at 4:30, Spurs were 2-goal up away to Brighton, but ended up losing 3-2. As we head into the international break, Liverpool lead Man City and Arsenal by a single point. Chelsea and Villa have fallen to 3 points further back from the leading three. Brighton are up to 6th. Man United are down in 14th. And Palace, Saints and Wolves are now your bottom three. Mark Cotton asks, at 7 games in, is it time to ask who's going to be the first manager to lose their job? Nobody likes to see people losing their job, but there's no shortage of candidates. We'll talk about the Wolves situation a little bit later on. I'm sure we'll touch on Ten Hag and that as well. Is there anybody else out there that we should be worrying about, Matt?
I kind of had Steve Cooper pegged as the first to go because he's not popular with Leicester City supporters, but he's clearly bought himself some time this weekend. So there's a few contenders, isn't there? I mean, I guess it depends on how quickly this Everton takeover goes through, for example, or whether Southampton think that maybe Russell Martin's lack of flexibility might count against him. But
lack of haircut, I think.
Really?
Yeah, we'll maybe touch on that later on. But yes. All right, many things to discuss today. The first of which is Brighton Spurs. Right, hands up the person who forgot to write that. So the first goal was Johnson. The second one was Maddison, of course. And then it all went Minte Rutter and then former gunner Danny Welbeck. All right. An enthralling encounter Sunday afternoon at the Amex. Spurs opening the scoring with Brennan Johnson and then Dominic Solanke. Brighton responding from 2 goals down to win it with goals from Minte Rutter and former Man United and Arsenal man Danny Welbeck. Crikey. Joining us now from the Amex is Andy Naylor with this report straight after the final whistle. Chastened Spurs players leaving the field, the manager shaking his head. What happened?
Well, I'd like to know what was said at half-time in both dressing rooms. Perhaps we'll find out. But you certainly couldn't see this turnaround coming at half-time. Tottenham were totally in control, 2-0 up, looked capable of scoring more goals. Udogie made a bad mistake that kind of let Brighton back in it for Minty's goal soon after half-time. And Brighton were superb in the second half and Tottenham fell to pieces. It really was unexpected at half-time.
A lot of people are calling this Spursy, but would you define it as quite Brighton-y as well, that second half?
Yeah, it was a mix. I think the key with Hurzeler is the amount of threats Brighton have going forward now, particularly in wide areas. That was always a policy of his at St. Pauli with their success. Mitoma was back to something like his best today. I thought he was outstanding on the left. Minte on the right. And also Rutter. He's really come into the fore now. Now, he started in the 10 role today, but he actually created Welbeck's goal sort of wide right, which is where he has been in other occasions this season as well. So they've got real threats going forward, problems at the back, running out of central defenders with Van Heck and Webster now injured. A lot of talk about Hurzeler's high line, but who cares about that if you've got the number of attacking threats that they've got, scoring goals from all areas of the attack, really.
Magnificent. And a much-needed win because it's the first, I think, in 5. How has it been, Andy, in the meantime, getting used to the squad? We were watching the players coming on and wondering who on earth a lot of these individuals were. Have you got your head around them?
Well, yeah, you've got to bear in mind they made 9 signings in the summer at a total cost of nearly 200 million. Some of those have gone out on loan, but some of them we haven't seen much of. I mean, Rajan Gruda actually made his debut today late on. Summer signing from Mainz. We've not seen him because of a calf injury. Vifa has been in and out in midfield. He's had injury problems, a recurring thigh issue. Kadioglu, who was actually replaced at half time. Hurtzler brought on Estupinan at left back for the second half. He's a new signing from Fenerbahce. So you've got to give these players time to bed in. I think what's quite interesting, Ruta, okay, it wasn't in the Premier League last season with Leeds, it was in the Championship, but he's coming into it from a background in English football rather than from foreign leagues. And I think, every player is different. Some adapt straight away, some need a bit more time. So considering they've got all these new faces, they're doing pretty well to go into the second international break in 6th place.
Andy Naylor of The Athletic. Wow. There you go then. Brighton coming back from 2 goals down at half-time. First time they've ever done that in the Premier League. And this very much the game that rescued Sky Viewers Super Sunday.
Yeah, and also the first time that Brighton have done that, but certainly not the first time that Spurs have done this. So according to Opta, this is the 10th time they've lost a Premier League game in which they've led by 2 or more goals. They're the first Premier League club to hit double figures, at least 3 more than any other team.
All right.
That is the definition of Spurs.
I mean,
that is where that comes from, surely.
So what happened? Andy was saying he'd love to know what was said in the halftime dressing rooms. Was it as simple as a tactical tweak, or was it about Spurs getting complacent? Daniel, what was your take?
I think Brighton just kind of played as they did in the first half, and they had chances in the first half. I know Spurs were 2-0 up, and I know Andy said there kind of no one could see that happening, but it was just a very open game between 2 teams who are committed to playing a certain way and sort of don't really seem to care what the opposition do. And therefore it felt like Brighton didn't really care that they were 2-0 down. They played in exactly the same way. Spurs made more mistakes. I think Brighton were a bit more solid second half, but then that was also because Spurs just completely lost their way and seemed unable to hold on to the ball, and also seemed unable to stop these kind of attacking salvos from Brighton wingers. And I think certainly more than any other non-Big Six team in the Premier League, when you play Brighton, if you start needing snookers, if you start chasing yourself, then you can quickly get lost, because they find out something that works and then they just drill down into it and overpower you and keep running at you. And defenders who are not feeling particularly confident, who have made a mistake, don't really like players running at them fast and trying to beat them and go past them both ways. And yeah, they just carried on doing it.
Brighton have been on that run of no wins in 4 in the Premier League. They had one in the League Cup, although that was against Wolves. They all count, though. Spurs, on the other hand, had come into this game on the back of 5 straight wins, and they looked set. Brennan Johnson with his 6th goal in 6 matches, which is phenomenal stuff, and James Maddison with the second one. They looked fantastic. Did they look fantastic in the first half?
I thought so. They look reminiscent of the Spurs of the start of last season to me. That's it. They can look irresistible when they're on the front foot and when they're allowed to dominate. But when they're on the back foot and facing adversity, there are always gaps to exploit. And individually, those 4 defenders have all got a mistake in them. But Udogie had an absolute nightmare. I mean, he's certainly directly at fault for 2 goals, and it's also involved in the third. He was booked in the second half, completely lost his head. And yeah, if they'd had a sort of a defensive-minded, solid left-back, then they might have even kept a clean sheet in this one, but that's not the Spurs way under Postecoglou.
I think it's fair to offer the game on Thursday as some mitigation for Spurs as well. I appreciate that the team was fairly changed for that, albeit the goalie and 2 of the back 4 started. Maddison, Solanke, Johnson all came off the bench. I think we sometimes don't take into consideration the planning and preparation that goes into games. The fact that Brighton have had a week to do that, whereas Spurs have not only had a game but had it away and had the travel, etc. involved. I think it's not unrealistic to think that is going to impact, particularly in the second half of games. So maybe there's a bit of an excuse for Tottenham there. I don't think there's too much for them to worry about as a result of this. It's just that it comes under the Spursy banner, which is not really what you want.
Well, it's interesting that last season when they were top of the table early on, the underlying numbers said that they were due to drop because their numbers are sort of mid-table in terms of XG, whereas now they got the second highest XG total in the league and the second best defensive record on XG, and yet they're they're ninth in the table, which suggests there is more to come from them. It's sort of the opposite of last season. But yeah, you don't worry about them because when they're in full flow, there's not many things better than them.
They're ninth, Brighton up in sixth. Are you getting your head around the new look Brighton, Daniel?
I think yes, insofar as whenever the players seem to change, they've got so many of these wingers between like Mitoma and Minter and Adingra and Rutter that, and then Welbeck just sort of is the kind of focal point, this still point around them, and it doesn't really matter who's in the team. They play the same way. So yes, the players seem to be different every week, and they do chop and change that. But because Hurzeler has this style that he wants to play, that's why he's got all these wingers, is he wants to be able to do it at full pelt all the time. So he wants those wingers to constantly run at players. Do it at 100%. And if you have to come off after 55, 60 minutes, or if I have to rest you for the next game, so be it, because that's how I want to play. So yes, in a way, I think the style is incredibly well defined already, for better and for worse, because they are a chaotic team with that high line, and they conceded 2 first half goals with good reason. They conceded 4 goals at Chelsea last week with good reason. They will be chaotic, but they're also great fun. And if you're not going to go and win the league and you might challenge for a top 6 or 7 place, like why not have loads of fun? Why not just have wingers running at players and scaring the life out of them? Because that's what fans want to see.
Yeah.
Felt significant for Hurzeler actually, to me, this game, having seen them in the flesh last week, because if they don't win this game, you're looking at it and thinking, okay, well, you beat Everton opening day, crisis club. You beat Man United, crisis club. Then you couldn't beat Ipswich at home, and you couldn't beat 10-man Forest at home, and you put forth an atrocious tactical display at Stamford Bridge next week. How are you getting the buy-in from supporters and managers there? But if you can say, well, we come from 2-0 down to beat Spurs in a ding-dong game that everybody enjoyed watching, then that sets you up nicely, I think, going into the break, rather than people thinking, oh, we've got this 31-year-old who we don't really know. Is this actually a good idea?
100%. Always better to win 3-2 than lose.
So I'm told, yeah.
Excellent. All right, anything else on that game?
I think the one thing you'd say for Spurs is it's just a bit all or nothing. And in that 18-minute period when they conceded 3 goals, there's nobody taking responsibility. Bentancur should be the responsible DM to stick his foot on the ball and just calm things down for 5 minutes and do nothing. But it just seems like it's always one or the other. But there was no, picked out a doggy earlier, but you can look at Van der Ven and Romero, and certainly Bentancur, who was again hapless for one of the goals. There's just nobody sort of taking responsibility.
Would you include manager Ange Postecoglou in that?
I meing, well, yeah, this is his vision in action, right? I mean, he could have sent on Sarr and Bissouma a bit early. They both came on at 3-2 down, but maybe at 2-1 with the crowd behind Brighton and all the momentum with Brighton, that's when you make your change. But they've got this carefree attitude throughout the team, and it starts with the team selection because they're so damn attacking. But yeah, they just don't just stop and just control the game and slow it down for 5 minutes. It just doesn't seem to be within their capabilities.
All right. Well,
he's an oddly passive figure, isn't he, Postecoglou? For a manager who spends all his time on the technical area and never sits down, you would expect him to be a bit more involved in the game as it's going on. But it doesn't seem to be his methodology, which is odd. For you think you'd make the decision to just sit back on the bench and not do anything, but. Anyway.
There you go. Well, both teams contributed to a wonderful end to Sunday. An afternoon that began with the eye-bleedingly bad Aston Villa Man United, which, Matt, you didn't see.
Mercifully not, yeah.
Because you were watching Chelsea against Nottingham Forest, which looked, from the reports, like really good fun. You had 2 goals, some spectacular last-minute saves, and a bit of a brawl between the players as well.
Yeah, it was a real kind of juxtaposition between the first and second half. And again, to bring it back to that Brighton game last week, you kind of saw the difference between an ideologue's approach in Hurzeler coming to Stamford Bridge last week and saying, well, this is the way we play and we'll either win 4-2 or lose 4-2. And Nuno Espirito Santo saying, well, the opposition have got far better attacking players and they can cause us lots of problems, so we're going to set up to contain and defend. And that's exactly what Forest did, and they were excellent at it for the first half. And then, strangely enough, when they scored the goal, which was a really well-worked set-piece, Ward-Prowse, Milenkovic and Chris Wood flicking it in, then they went a bit more open and sort of looked for the second goal rather than sit to protect it. And, yeah, lo and behold, Chelsea equalise, and then and Ward-Prowse gets sent off for something pretty silly, and it all goes a bit crackers from there.
He picked the ball up.
He did. He stumbled. He was in a one-on-one with Nicholas Jackson just over halfway. Stumbled, lost his footing, and instinctively goes to grab the ball. And on the one hand, you think, oh, he's taken one for the team there. On the other hand, I think there's a lot that needs to happen between Jackson picking up the ball and it going into the net from there. And I'd rather just let the game play out and see if he actually scores or not, rather than go a man down. But there again, if he scores, Forest leaves the game 2-1 in all probability. But yeah, we saw some unbelievably good saves, 2 of them at the end. The game just went end to end. I mean, credit to Forest for playing well with 10 men. For the amount of time they did, there was 13 minutes of stoppage time in the match, largely because of what unfortunately looks like quite a bad injury for Morgan Gibbs-White.
Right.
But yeah, you had Mykhailo Mudryk came on and did probably his most impressive thing in a Chelsea shirt to hair down the left wing, then put in a brilliant cross for Nkunku, whose shot was well saved by Sells, albeit Nkunku should have scored. And then at the other end, Jota Silva denied by we called it a Banks-esque save from Robert Sanchez. It really did have that kind of energy.
Awesome.
Yeah, a really, really fun game, and yeah, good for Forest given what happened last week, and good for Nuno in particular, who got his team selection all wrong in that match.
What was the fight about?
It was a kind of strange one. It was. I didn't have a great angle of it, to be honest, but Nico Williams, who'd come on and who likes a bit of rough and tumble, kind of pushed Cucurella, and he took Enzo Maresca out, and it was right by the bench, and there'd been a little bit of needle before that, so everybody piled on, but there was a big hold me back, lads, energy to a lot of it, apart from Nicholas Jackson, who swung a couple of haymakers that didn't really connect.
Right. So there's some concern about whether that will be picked up on review, and he might be suspended for Chelsea's next game, which will also see Marc Cucurella out of the picture, and also Wesley Fofana, and Colwell's come off injured as well. So 1 or 2 questions for...
Yeah, Colwell and Madueke obviously also in the England squad. I think they're both okay. Madueke did the post-match interviews, which is always a signal that a player is not particularly badly injured. Gibbs-White would be the bigger concern. Obviously, he's in the England squad as well for now, but I'd be surprised if he actually ended up joining up with them. But yeah, hopefully Colwell and Madueke are okay.
From a Chelsea point of view, though, those suspensions counting for the game against Liverpool, which will be their first fixture back after the international break. Daniel, a good point for Forest.
Yeah, it is, and their away form is been mightily impressive this season. I mean, the kind of irony is that they've taken double the number of points from Liverpool and Chelsea away as they have Fulham, Bournemouth and Wolves at home, but the home form should be the easier one to solve. If your biggest problem is how do we double down on being undefeated away from home in mid-October, then you're doing something right. And if Forest do get that home form right, they've got Palace at home after the international break. If they were to win that, then you can certainly see why Nuno would think, all the talk within the club pre-season was they want to push for a top half finish, which sounded pretty fanciful at the time. But if they go and beat Palace, and then they're already, I think, 9th or 10th now, so why not? Nuno has them incredibly well organised. Milenkovic, I mean, I think we've talked about him before. Matt has talked about him before in the show, but he is just a revelation for Forest in terms of that leadership at the back, because defensively from set pieces, they have been a shambles before. They've been really bad at conceding late goals through lack of concentration. So just that leadership at the back, I think, has been pretty transformative.
Magnificent. Were the fans singing the I don't want anybody else when I think about you, I touch Matt Sells chant that you've previously referenced?
No, their new one is a song about Hudson Odoi to the tune of Estelle's American Boy, which is a pretty good one as well.
Yeah,
so
really
I
good.
highly recommend that.
But it's not as good as when I think about you, I touch Matt Sells.
No, because nothing could be.
But if you can get Copenhagen, Leverkusen and Marseille into a chant for a team that don't regularly play European football, I think that shows a bit of ingenuity.
There. Tim, what's your favourite Wolves chant?
I mean, well, it's O'Neill out at the moment. That's all they're singing. So
More Wolves talk to come.
I'll try and answer your question. It's got to be the Stevie Balls Atata song, which still gets an air in.
Go on then.
Most away games. Stevie Balls Atata wears an England cap, plays Wolverhampton. He's a lovely chap. Scores with his left foot, scores with his right. And when he plays the Albion, he scores all night. But I'll take some swear words out.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
Legacy. Very nice.
Hatred coming Tim's way from West Brom fans, hopefully, this week.
Fine, bring it on. Don't mind that.
Also on Sunday, there was the Aston Villa Man United game. Blow the whistle referee, as Jamie Carragher said with a couple of moments to go. Daniel, did you see much of this? What was your takeaway?
I mean, I saw all of it, and that is about the takeaway. I mean, yeah, it was. I think sometimes you can, in hindsight, say that was always going to be the score. I think Manchester United needed to get some control back, and Erik ten Hag went very back to basics with Maguire and Evans starting, and he went for that control in midfield. There was a lot of slow passing. There were just very few players on both teams, to be honest, but it was very rare in the game that a player actually had space in front of them to run, because the two teams were being relatively defensive, relatively risk averse. And also because the passing was so slow that by the time the ball arrived at the feet of Marcus Rashford or Morgan Rogers, particularly in the second half, they just had nowhere to go other than turning back and playing the ball back into midfield. I'd love to know how much of the game was spent in the middle third, because it felt like 95% of it watching on TV. And look, to say what you said earlier, Villa had a magnificent night on Wednesday. That, I think, for this first half of the season, given that they started pretty well, I think that's probably the priority now. If you get 2 or 3, maybe 3 or 4 wins in the Champions League in your first 6 games, you're basically through. So at that point, you can see where you are in the league, because Villa's ceiling is top 4, and they achieved it last season. So you try and do that again, but the reason you're trying it is to play in the Champions League, and they're just beating Bayern Munich. So that was always, I think, going to be the priority over today's game.
Fair enough. They had a magnificent night on Wednesday. Man United not so much on Thursday, when they were 2-0 up in a manner familiar to another set of Premier League supporters. So I'll say that again, because it took me a while to get the words out. When they were 2-0 up in a manner familiar to another Premier League club, and ended up losing... let's go again. When they were 2-0 up, away to Porto, and then found themselves losing 3-2, but managed to pull it back through the efforts of Harry Maguire for a 3-3 draw in the Premier League. That point might have seemed enough to Ten Hag, but having equalled Man United's worst ever Premier League start after 7 games last season, he's now beaten it. This is their worst start to a Premier League season ever. They've got 5 goals and 8 points from 7 league matches. No wins from 2 in the Europa League. Redeeming features, Tim?
What, from today? I mean, they played to a coherent plan, which they never do. You know, they played very narrow, stopped Morgan Rogers, despite having a few bookings. In fact, I think before the game, I heard a stat that if they have someone sent off today, it would be the first time in their history that they'd have had players sent off in 3 consecutive games.
Right.
Marcus Rashford was very, very, very lucky not to be that man. And was subbed off a minute later after should have got his second booking.
And they also became the first team this season to stop John Duran coming on and scoring. Is that right?
There you go. Small wins. But I've seen quite a few Man United fans were chanting attack in the final few minutes, and I've seen quite a few tweets criticising them for their lack of attacking output. And yes, they've only scored 5 in 7 this season. Only Southampton have scored fewer. But, you know, when you look at that Spurs performance, getting it completely wrong at both ends of the pitch last week, they've at least got it right at one end this week.
They did today.
Yeah,
Not so
today.
much on Thursday.
No, you know, that's from such a low base, they at least did something decent today.
14th in the table. There you go. We'll talk about the teams up at the top next. Matt, you're going to be on straight out of Cobham discussing the Forest draw. When will that be out?
That will be out Monday, probably lunchtime-ish, maybe afternoon. But yeah, we don't often have a free week, so we can spend a lot of time talking about that, I think. And the start to the season in general, which has obviously been pretty positive, albeit gets trickier now, I think. Maybe like we're going to talk about with Liverpool. Chelsea's fixture list has been relatively kind thus far, but yeah. Trips to Anfield.
The season starts here.
Yeah, quite.
Or at least starts in 2 weeks' time, when you'll be off to Anfield for Liverpool-Chelsea. Liverpool this weekend going into the international break off the back of yet another win. Their 9th from Arne Slot's first 10 matches in all competitions. Came courtesy of a Diogo Jota goal after just 9 minutes. Arne Slot's start, the best of any Liverpool manager ever. It's the first time Liverpool have ever started a season that well in the Premier League era. He also, Slot gets the Liverpool DNA to the extent that he managed to complain about the 12:30 Saturday slot as well in his post-game comments, which is nice. Anything fresh that this game told us about Liverpool, Daniel?
Well, I think it's fair to say that, Nottingham Forest at home, brain fade aside, there is a kind of routine to these wins that you don't normally get under a new manager. That kind of new manager journey, and Chelsea are a perfect example, and so are Brighton, is you're fascinated by what's going to be different and what there's going to change and which players are going to be brought through. And with Liverpool,
I'm so sorry, could you say all of that again? Because I accidentally clicked on the YouTube feed and you came back through the thing. I'm so sorry, Daniel. Sorry about that.
I'll just start again.
Thanks, though.
I think there's been a kind of routine to Liverpool's wins this season that I found really surprising. Normally when a new manager comes in, we're all sort of fascinated to learn how they'll play and which players will be key and whether they'll change the system or whether they'll change the style of play. And Slot has also obviously done some of those things, but it's as if that the team seems to be playing, I thought when I was watching the Palace win the weekend, they seem to be playing like a team who the manager's been in charge for like 18 months, 2 years. Like everyone sort of knows exactly what they're doing. There's nothing wildly exciting. They're not trying anything breathtakingly new, but they're just sort of all getting on with their jobs because they know in most games they play, they're better than the team they're facing. And that's what it feels like. I almost had to remind myself that Liverpool had a new manager when they were beating Crystal Palace 1-0 at the weekend, because everything just seems so, Virgil van Dijk's leading. He's marshalling the defence. You've got the midfield looks pretty capable, although with new players. You've got Mohamed Salah as the main outlet in the front three, but other options rotating around. It all just feels pretty similar, which is a massive compliment. It's quite boring, and that's a really good thing when you've got a new manager at a Big Six club.
You asked Daniel what we sort of learned from Liverpool in this one. We learned they have a goalkeeper called Vítězslav Jaros, who I'd never heard of, and probably fair enough really, because he's been sort of fourth or fifth choice behind Adrian and Kelleher and Andy Lonergan in the past few years. But yeah, he came on surprisingly, of course, for his debut. He said when he was getting ready to come on for Alisson, people around him were telling him, well, there's your shirt, you need to put that on, and there's your shin pads, get them on. So obviously, a bit of a rush to get on the field. But he seemed to, took it in his stride, didn't look nervous, and yeah, he did well. I don't know if you've heard him speak.
No.
He gave a post-match interview. You'd be shocked to hear him. He's, from the Czech Republic, but he's got quite a gruff northern accent.
Really?
Not Scouse, not like a Jan Molby sort of, half European, half Scouse accent.
Right.
But he has spent time on loan at Stockport, which I think is where he's picked this up from. But yeah, he's been out in the wilderness, Notts County, Stockport. He was at Sturm Graz last season, where they won the league for the first time in 10
wilderness
years.
clubs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Sorry to any Sturm Graz supporters listening. Also at St Patrick's in Ireland a couple of seasons ago.
Right. And he went in as opposed to Kelleher because Kelleher was ill.
He was ill.
Right.
So yeah, Jaros Slot said afterwards had been keen to get back on loan again this season for some game time, but he sort of said, after Adrian's gone, we need a good third keeper, and you're going to be it. And I mean, he might not play again this season, but great moment for him to come on, keep the clean sheet, a couple of decent saves. Yeah.
Nice. Excellent. Matt, was there anything you wanted to say about Liverpool, or shall I ask you about Crystal Palace? The bottom three now, Crystal Palace. Really missing Olise, perhaps?
I mean, that's the obvious thing that I drew from it as well. And he did get 10 goals and 6 assists in 19 Premier League games last season, which is a phenomenal output. And they've only scored 3 goals this season, Palace, which is, it's not good, is it? They played Eddie Nketiah as an out-and-out striker in this game, which I guess was pleasing for him. But
had the ball in the back of the net before it was called back for offside.
Yeah, and that's a transfer that really needs to work for them, doesn't it? Because Mateta certainly stopped scoring goals, and the burden can't fall solely on Eza to produce something in every game. It's funny how quickly stock rises and falls. We talk about first managers to go. Obviously, that's not going to be Glasner, but you think how strongly he finished last season and how meek his team look now. It's quite stark.
It is. And he can't even go to the youth team, particularly, to draw reserves from them, because they this weekend took on Brighton at under 21 level and lost 10-0. 10-0.
2-0 after 56 minutes. Didn't have a man sent off. How does that happen?
But it's slightly concerning for Glasner. He said last week, it feels like the players thought this season was going to be easier than it was because of the run they'd had. And then last season was just slightly concerning. But it seems like they're a team very much built around Adam Wharton. They don't dribble. They've only completed 29 dribbles this season, which is way below any other Premier League team. So they just don't do that.
What do they do instead?
So balls into the final third, they're quite high on that, like fifth in the table for that. And Wharton is the one who plays the majority of those passes.
Right.
But he was really struggling with a groin injury during this game. He got taken off after an hour. It was very ineffective. Will Hughes and Mateta came on and actually made a big difference. Both of those players were involved in all three of the chances that Palace created. I thought Hughes was great. Mateta came on and used his strength. They pushed Nketiah out wide, which isn't exactly where you want him either. And then I think they had Sarr at right wing back and Klein at left wing back at this point. So it was all pretty makeshift. Let's just do what we can to nick a point. But I guess, if you're going to be sort of a bottom half mid-table team and you're not going to defend and play on the counter, you want to be this possession team playing great football like Southampton. You've got to be really good at it, and Palace look way off at the moment.
Their transfer business looks really bad, doesn't it? Like up there with the worst of the summer, I think. And I'd be interested to know Glasner's take on that, because I'm sure he made assurances that when Elise and Anderson were leaving, that people were going to come in, and think what would have happened if Gay had gone as well. But Kamada, saw him at Stamford Bridge, wasn't particularly impressed with him. Nketiah, as we say, hasn't scored. Ismaila Sarr can't seem to get a start or a goal. It's looking like it might be a long season for Crystal Palace.
Down at the bottom three, alongside Southampton, who were beaten 3-1 Saturday afternoon away at Arsenal. They actually took the lead and briefly gave the assembled Gunners, the supporters, a bit of a scare. Cameron Archer it was who gave them the lead in this game and then did the bow and arrow celebration pleasingly. But only about 3 minutes later, Kai Havertz responded for Arsenal, scoring for the 7th game in a row at the Emirates in all competitions. In the match report on The Athletic, which is a fine read, there's lots of great comments. One from Bill L, who says, everything I thought I knew about Havertz from his time at Chelsea was wrong. He really is an amazing player, incredibly hard-working, passionate, defensive monster, seems to do everything on the pitch and has a sneaky, dirty side and never slows down. He is a player of the year candidate for me, says Bill L. This is Kai Havertz we're talking about. It's impossible to reconcile what he is with what I thought he was at Chelsea in his early time at Arsenal. Who amongst us can subscribe to those sentiments? Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, it's a strong assessment, but it's basically accurate. Perhaps mine is the player of the year stuff just for now. But it's funny to think that they wanted, originally I think Mason Mount was their first choice when they were going for players, and how kind of, how things, talked about Oliver Glasner just now, but how things kind of turn and wane on certain decisions. Not only do I think Havertz has been brilliant this season, I think he's made Bukayo Saka better, because Saka only got 9 assists in the whole of last season. He scored 16 goals. Like, his responsibility was to have to score because Havertz wasn't much or as much. And Saka's got 7 assists in 7 games in the league this season so far. The record's 20, and it feels like there's always someone who sets the pace and then it never quite gets broken or equalled. But 7 in 7 games. He's creating more chances. He's putting more crosses into the box. He's doing so from slightly deeper because he believes that Havertz is going to get him on the end of it, because he is pretty good in the air and he is able now to hold up the ball. At the start of last season, that just wasn't really happening. So, and add in Arsenal being brilliant at set pieces, which means Saka is contributing from those in-swinging corners from the right. And you've got a player who is setting record-breaking pace, albeit early in the season, for assists, and having been the main focal goal scorer last season.
Do you know who the last player to get 7 assists from the first 7 games of the season was?
I was going to guess. Good guess.
No,
I was going to guess Thierry Henry.
Paul Pogba. Paul Pogba, which is topical, because I don't know if you saw, but he's just had that 4-year ban for doping picked up.
Bring back the Pogback hashtag that worked so well last time.
So he'll now, it's been reduced to 18 months. He'll now be available, by my calculations, from March of next year. His Juve contract runs for another season or so, I think to 2026. So He's, 31 or so at the time?
Welcome to Inter Miami, yeah.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. Anyway, so back to this game. Saints better, were they? They hit the post a couple of times. A wonderful Dibbling doing his business.
Yeah, they were better because they were absolutely wretched on Monday, and Russell Martin made no mistake in telling everybody that he told the players that the fight and commitment and courage and all that sort of malarkey was not good enough. They have picked up this really annoying habit that promoted teams often do. It beset Forest in their first season back, which is conceding goals in clusters. I think in 4 of their 7 league games, they've conceded like 2 goals in 6 minutes or 2 goals in 7. I think it was 2 goals in 8, whatever. And that just, you can't afford to do that. Southampton haven't scored more than once in a league game yet this season. So, by its very nature, you can't afford to concede more than one, let alone conceding clusters. So that's something he's going to have to sort out. 'Cause it just seems that whenever they concede, which is definitely the case on Monday, and I think it was the same here, everybody just sort of has a little panic and doesn't know what to do. And really good teams will just exploit that.
Okay. In lieu of any tactical insight, I would offer that one of my maxims in life is that you should never trust a man who hasn't changed his haircut since childhood.
It's less of an egregious offence than wearing jeans on the touchline, which has become far too common.
Okay. Does Russell Martin wear jeans?
No, he doesn't, and that's why I'm saying he should be given some clemency for this.
Okay. All right.
I also feel like this is a real low-pressure game for Southampton, isn't it? No one expects them to win. We can say, well, they did lead for a little while. They're obviously improving. Well, 3 of the next 4 are Leicester, Everton and Wolves, so let's see how they're doing after that point.
Okay. They took the lead against Arsenal. Fulham took the lead against Man City, who equally came back to win 3-2. Fulham, of course, had previously lost 16 straight matches against the side from the blue half of Manchester. They really shouldn't have lost this one, though, should they, Tim? And
Yes.
You're familiar with the reason why they did, though.
Oh, very. Yeah, absolutely. Adama Traore missing one-on-ones. That's in XG numbers, Fulham 2.36 to City's 1.58.
Really?
City kind of got away with one here, I thought. Although Fulham did come away with the assist of the season so far. Raul Jimenez's back-heeled cross for Pereira, I think it was. Absolutely gorgeous. He always tries stuff like that. His Rabona crosses are normally his thing, but this time it was back to goal, so it was back heel flick.
Right.
Very
Another
nice.
former Wolves player, of course.
Yeah, and it was he who assisted Traore twice back in the Etihad back in 2019. Probably his best Premier League day when he did score 2 one-on-ones that day. But that was very much out of keeping. I mean,
That was why Pep was so spooked by him in the post-match.
Right.
Yeah. I wonder who you'd back more in a one-on-one out of Adama Traore and Timo Werner.
Well, that is exactly my question. I think I asked it when I came in today. Who would you rather have through on goal? And I'm not sure what my answer would be. Daniel, Forest signed both players. One of them is one-on-one with the keeper in the 91st minute for Forest. Who do you want it to be?
If it was their first chance of the game, Werner. If it was their 4th or 5th chance of the game, Adama Traore, because I think Werner gets in his own head and that would make him far less likely to score the other ones. It's funny. The game completely reminded me of a game almost, I think, one day off 5 years ago today, which Tim will remember fondly, when Adama Traore and Raul Jimenez played for Wolves at Man City and they won 2-0. And Traore scored both goals in exactly the same way, through on goal. And he took both of them so well, so comfortably, like never looked like he was missing. And yet, yeah, he obviously... I think the second one, where Edison comes out, I think I give him a bit of leeway for that one. But yeah, the first one was really poor. And yeah, Fulham should have scored 6. They were brilliant.
What's going on with City at home this season? How have they gone behind against Ipswich, Brentford and Fulham? That
I don't know,
feels a
Matt.
bit... It's curious, isn't it? I mean, I was trying to think of... I got to West Ham away at the start of the season as a performance that they'd put in consistently across 90 minutes. You thought that was pretty good from Man City, but I'm not sure that we've seen one other than that. I know they do often start slow, and they've got the kind of low-res Rodri in Kovacic in place now,
Right.
and he can come in and score a couple of goals. But yeah, sort of underwhelmed a bit by Manchester City so far.
They definitely missed Rodri. Also, just on Traore, he has only scored in 6 years now. He's scored 13 goals. Players to have scored more goals in that time include Lewis Dunk, Dele Alli, Eden Hazard, Jesse Lingard,
in the last 6 years.
Yes,
not
in the Premier League, and Virgil van Dijk. So this is the kind of, it's absolutely no surprise. It's just not his forte.
Right.
But talking of contests, his foot race with Kyle Walker was very enjoyable.
Last week we were mourning the lack of a fastest player in the Premier League competition between, for example, Van der Ven and Kyle Walker, but we got one with...
Yeah, I was looking at when it will be Fulham Spurs. It's December the 1st for Traore v Van der Ven.
So sometimes your own mortality really whacks you in the face, doesn't it? Something happens in life. And I felt like for Kyle Walker, that must just have been one of those moments of like, oh, that's gone now then. Right, fine.
Jeremy Doku with a lovely goal. A venomous strike, if you will, in the 82nd minute. And then Rodrigo Muniz pulled one back with a couple of minutes to play. And City made it 17 wins in a row against Fulham. And 50 home games unbeaten in all competitions. And there's a little bit of doubt about whether Guardiola's going to be there for Fulham's visit next season. But I guess we'll have to just keep across that. Because there's other things to discuss, like, for example, the other 3 o'clock kickoffs on Saturday, which we'll be tackling next. Dum 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 dum. Right, okay. Excellent. Just a quick break, YouTube viewer, because Danny was sorting out his headphones. But he's back now. As I tell you that the Totally Football Show European edition will be out on Tuesday afternoon this week. Among the talking points, remarkable scenes in Girona, with Casanega saving 3 penalties, although one of them was the same penalty taken twice. So, unfortunately for him, he'll only go in the record books as 2 penalty saves, even though he saved against 3 different players.
So he doesn't get to keep the match ball.
I don't know, Matt, what the policy is on that. I suspect not. Dortmund, over in Germany, Dortmund did again. Leverkusen gave away a 2-goal lead and were held by bottom club Holstein Kiel, if it's Bundesliga you're after. We'll be discussing what happened in Serie A and in France as well. You know, the usual continental gamut of action. JJ Jenkins, you heard our last pod where we asked, when was the last time that Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid both lost on the same night in Europe? Well, JJ Jenkins actually went and looked it up, which, to be fair, we could have done ourselves. But anyway, thank you, JJ Jenkins. Turns out it was only back in 2020, so hardly epochal. Anyway, but JJ points out the last 3 times it's happened, on each occasion, it was with a 4-0 defeat for Atletico. What does it mean? I don't know. Anyway... we'll be discussing European things on Tuesday. Right now on the Totally Football Show, the other Saturday 3 o'clock matches, which were Leicester's 1-0 win, West Ham's whopping 4-goal thriller. Actually, if you include... What was the score there?
4-1.
4-1. Yeah, right. So Leicester's 1-0 win, West Ham's 4-1 victory, and, of course, events at the GTEC Stadium where Brentford beat Wolves 5-3. All right. We'll get our thoughts on this very, very shortly. But we spoke a little bit earlier on to another Wolves following colleague, Steve Madley. It's Madeley, isn't it? Steve Madeley of The Athletic, who was there at the GTEC to find out how much he enjoyed this game and how worried he is for Wolverhampton Wanderers. Steve, 6 goals in the first half, 8 in all. How much fun was this?
Not much fun if you're a Wolves fan. It was a weird game because it was eventful, and yet I didn't come away from it thinking that was a classic. It was more a case of eight goals, of which very many were quite sloppy and messy and not particularly memorable.
Indeed. You mentioned Wolves' predicament. Last week we had Lamina in tears at the final whistle. Gary O'Neill looking haunted post-game in this one. How bad is the situation around the team right now?
It's obviously bad. I think it's not too far from where we thought it might be when we saw the fixtures, given that Wolves were handed a brutal start. But it is worse than we thought it might be because I think over the course of 7 or 8 games, the first 7 or 8 games, you probably expect Wolves to have picked up 1 or 2 scalps of the big clubs as they did fairly routinely last season, and they just haven't done that, and they haven't really been close to doing it. It's bad. We probably won't know how bad until we get to those 8 games in November and December against the slightly lesser sides, which looks like it's going to really define Wolves' season. But yeah, it's bad. Just how bad, I think, will become evident over the next few weeks.
All right. Well, so far it's their worst points tally at this stage of a season in 60 years. Whose fault would you say it is?
I would say the classic cop-out answer that it's a combination of several things. I think the recruitment clearly didn't go as Gary O'Neill thought it was going to go. He's said that publicly, that he clearly wanted a centre-back with Premier League experience to come in and replace Max Kilman, and he didn't get it. And then that's been compounded by the loss of Yerson Mosquera for the season. So they're really short at centre-back. Pedro Neto wasn't replaced, but then I would argue that it's almost impossible to replace Pedro Neto like for like. And they did bring in a few attacking players to try to make up for that. So, yeah, recruitment wasn't good. Players haven't performed, really. Big players like João Gomez, Mario Lemina, Nelson Semedo, who had an excellent season last season, haven't performed. Even Mateus Cunha, despite scoring a few goals, hasn't really been the player that we saw last season. So there's the players. And also, you can't absolve Gary O'Neill of criticism, because he made this decision in the summer to change from the way of playing that worked for 2/3 of last season before the injuries bit at the end, and he wanted to go to 4 at the back from what was essentially a 3 at the back system last season. He wanted to press a bit higher, be more front foot, be more aggressive, and that was obviously a gamble, because when you've got something that's worked essentially until the injuries kind of derailed it slightly, it's inevitably a gamble to go away from that. And so far, it's a gamble that hasn't paid off, and I think he's now beginning to accept that with his comments post-match yesterday, that it sounds almost certain that he will revert to 3 at the back. And the next game, Man City at home, so I guess there's no better time to pack your defence than for that fixture.
Yeah, indeed. So you mentioned it, easier fixtures possibly on the way, but City before any of that, after the international break. Is there any danger that patience is at an end for Gary O'Neill?
I think patience is very much coming to an end in terms of the fans. The fan base, I think, for the first time, really, the away fans, who obviously tend to be the most loyal and the last to turn, definitely turned at Brentford around the first substitution and then at the final whistle. So their patience has snapped. I don't sense any sign at the moment that the patience within the club has snapped. I think there's an acknowledgement that Gary O'Neill's been dealt a difficult hand, that he did an excellent job for the first 2/3 of last season, and then had some real mitigating factors for how it slid away at the end. So, I mean, that patience won't be infinite. If we get to those games in November and December and they don't go well, even if they don't start well, then I think it's going to be hard for them to maintain that patience indefinitely. But I'd be surprised if he didn't at least get to those games and get the chance to start them off.
There we go. Steve Madeley of The Athletic. Steve Madeley of The Athletic. Tim.
Yes, it's not good. I think Steve's kind of summed up the picture really well there, certainly with Gary O'Neill. But also for the first time on Saturday was the first time I'd heard anti-ownership chants. Just a minority, a couple of times during the game, but we want Fosun out or whatever, which people might be surprised to hear, because they've completely transformed Wolves from a mid-table Championship club to Europe, and quite a few seasons down in the Premier League. But I think this I know they've had a run of tough fixtures, but it has kind of brought into focus the bigger picture that the club is drifting, and fans who've been asked to pay a lot more money to watch the team this season, which was a bone of contention, are starting to lose patience now. I think rightly so, because Wolves, they've given up all kind of ambitions of disrupting the top 6, 7 or 8. I think Fosun probably realised it would cost too much money, to take Wolves to that place, so or FFP regulations or whatever. So they've made a lot of money in the past 2 years, but that hasn't really been reinvested into the team. Also, the stadium, they talked about revamping the stadium. They've done nothing on the stadium in quite a few years. So I think fans are kind of rightly asking, what are Fosun for now? If we're just aiming for mid-table and slow, patient growth, you will get sucked down the sinkhole at some point, and it could be this season. So yeah, O'Neill, that's obviously an issue, but I think the fans are really starting to look at the owners now as well.
All right, let's talk about Brentford a little bit. Their fans don't need patience because they score so quickly, Matt.
Yeah, quite. I mean, Thomas Frank's got to be one of the most underrated managers in the Premier League, hasn't he? They lost Ivan Toney. His replacement got injured and is out for the foreseeable. and yet they've scored the same number of goals as Liverpool in the league.
Remarkable. Remarkable. This business of scoring early, this time it took a little bit longer, but they didn't have the kick-off, which presumably slowed down their tactics a bit. They still managed to get a goal inside the first minute and 16 seconds, was it, Tim? Around about that mark.
Around about
That mark. Why can't they do it at the start of a second half or straight? Well, they did score after a kick-off on this. In fact, Denim John pointing out that Norgard's goal was 32 seconds after the kick-off from Wolves, making it 2-2.
Must be all down to the set-piece coach, Keith Andrews, which I got a big kick out of, realising that he was all of a sudden Brentford's set-piece coach. That had totally passed me by. It's the position to have these days, isn't it? But he's got to be the first person who's actually had a football career that we've heard of who is a set-piece coach in the Premier League. Probably only me listening to this podcast had any interest in that whatsoever, but there we are. That and the fact that when Ait Nouri scored the last goal of the game, the sound of the ball hitting the net was louder than the crowd's reaction to the goal because it was so meaningless in the match. I thought that was fantastic.
Very nice. Daniel, why is it that they can't do... If you can do this for kick-off of a game, why can't you do it after any kick-off?
I think, well... Using the early goal this week as an example, it was scored by a central defender who, because of the very nature of it, we talked about last week how they send players up for the long ball, and it ended up after with that defender going forward that there's a massive bloke in the penalty area who we should say all afternoon Wolves failed to mark. I think Brentford are really good at that because they've got absolutely massive defenders. They started this weekend with Ethan Pinnock, who's 1m94, Christopher Ayers 1m98, and Nathan Collins is 1m93.
Wow.
Like if you've got those three there, so Ayer played left back and they played them all. If those three go up for a corner, like it's pretty hard to stop if the delivery is good because you can mark two of them out of the game, or as Mario Lemina did, foul one of them and give away a penalty, and the other two scored headers. So like it's pretty hard to deal with. I think the first kickoff of the game, they send up one of the, I think they send up one of those defenders or send up someone to do it. I think maybe when there's already been a kickoff, there's just been a goal.
Right.
It feels a bit weird if you've just conceded.
Yeah,
hence
no,
you have a kickoff.
but the second
It feels
half,
a
I
bit weird to
suppose you
send
could
up a
do it.
defender.
But there might be an element of the other team is still napping a little bit while the...
It comes back to the excellent coaching, doesn't it? And I think as I'm looking at the Brentford team sheet from this game, I'm looking and thinking, who's the star player? It's probably Mbermo, isn't it? But I used to watch Ethan Pinnock play for Dulwich Hamlet, and he's a really competent Premier League centre half. Christian Norgard, really good in the Championship. Did you think that he was going to step up to be a Premier League player? Van den Berg couldn't get a kick for Liverpool, looked good in this game. I think it all comes back to Thomas Frank and his staff just being excellent. And it's fascinating to see what his next move is, or if he's missed the boat on that. And he's Brentford and that kind of level of football for life.
We shall see.
Just going to point out for listeners who might want to know on Daniel's behalf that 1m94 is 6'3".
Yeah, thanks for that. I was wondering. It was really unusual.
How much is 198? Oh, sorry, did you say 198?
198 is 6'4".
6'4".
I'm incredibly European.
Right. I mean, it's tall, isn't it? 6 goals in 7 matches now for Brian Mbermo. And Thomas Frank, a name that was linked to the position at Old Trafford in the past.
Chelsea as well over the summer, yeah.
That's where Brentford will be after the international break, taking on Man United, which will be interesting. Just other stats about this game, because obviously there were 8 goals in it, 8 different scorers, and from 8 different nations. That's the first time that's ever happened in a Premier League match. Lovely. Excellent. What else happened on Saturday at 3 o'clock? West Ham beat Ipswich 4-1. That's what. What's the one thing... Calvin Phillips back at the ground where he struggled a bit last season. What's the one thing he didn't want to happen? 48 seconds in.
Yeah.
Gives the... Well, actually, 40 seconds in probably gave the ball away. And 48 seconds in, it's netting on the back of his team's net.
It wasn't even the worst part of his afternoon as well, because for Jared Bowen's goal, he became a bit of a weekend social media meme for the way that... It looks like, this isn't what happened, but it looks like Bowen runs at him, slows down, realising it's like there's an opponent in the way, sees it's Calvin Phillips and just sort of relaxes and thinks, okay, I can just go round him, and does that, and then just slots in the bottom corner, of which Calvin Phillips has sort of done about a 270 degrees, but not actually done anything other than stick out a leg. It looked pretty awful, I'm afraid to say.
All right. Goals in this game. The first from Mikel Antonio. Liam Delap equalised briefly for Ipswich. That's 4 goals in 7 now for Liam Delap. And then Kudus and Bowen. And it adds up to Julian Lopetegui's first home win as a West Ham manager in the Premier League. Also, West Ham's biggest victory in the Premier League since December of last year.
And the significance to that comes back to our earlier question of who's the first Premier League manager to be sacked going to be, because Lopetegui would have been right up there if they'd lost this game, wouldn't they? And now he's sort of out of the conversation, and he's got the... I don't know if he got the backing of Mikel Antonio, or Mikel Antonio just felt like completely throwing David Moyes under the bus.
What did he say?
He said, we're just getting the rust out from last season and how we played then. Like, I mean, really? With Lopetegui, the big, expansive manager, is he? I'm not sure. That just felt like a bit of an unnecessary dig from a man who's helped Antonio win what I would assume is the only trophy of his career.
Indeed. If we're undecided on who will be the first manager to leave the Premier League, who do you think will be the first manager in? Will it be rusty old David Moyes?
Yeah, I'm sure he's...
You think?
Graham Potter did his MNF thing last week. He's clearly hoping to be the next one in.
All right. Steve Cooper boosting his chances of remaining in position for a while longer with that 1-0 win for Leicester against Bournemouth. First win in the Premier League under Steve Cooper, first clean sheet as well. And this all came down to a brilliant solo goal from a teenager named Facundo Buonanotte.
Yeah, one of the best names in the Premier League.
Yeah?
Yeah, slightly surprised Brighton loaned him out, to be fair. But
he's on loan from
Brighton.
Oh, Brighton. Right, that makes sense. Okay. Sorry, Daniel, you wanted to contribute?
I was going to say, so presumably Leicester fans are all happy now they've won at home and they've got more points than Ipswich and Southampton
you're saying that like a man who knows that they're not happy
with
at
a
all.
Punchline.
Right.
It's the replies to the club's tweet, and I know we shouldn't judge, and this is a barometer of our own thing, but from Leicester fans who are not bots and clearly were at the game, are just like, yeah, he still needs to go immediately. He still needs to be sacked. I understand that Enzo Maresca left, and therefore that you had this philosophy for manager, and that's trading that in for Steve Cooper's second half, where you basically deliberately have one shot in the half but keep a clean sheet and win 1-0. I understand that's not wildly exciting, but we've seen clubs try and play their way out the back and short passing and pressing, and we've seen Burnley last season, and that could easily have happened to Leicester with Maresca. And they've got a defensive manager in, but they've got one, they're 2 points behind Manchester United. Like, I know Man United are rubbish at the moment, but they've got, as I say, they've got more points than the other two promoted clubs combined. I cannot fathom why there's such negativity.
Yeah, I don't think you can use Man United as a metric right now, but yeah.
No, but even like I've been in the stadium. It's not just social media. I've been in the stadium and like they are getting on the team's back. They're calling for substitutions after like 25 minutes, half an hour. It just seems absolutely bizarre to me. I just don't think
because his last club was Forest, though, wasn't it? That's
probably, yeah. But then, yeah, I'm sure there is. But you'd think that, I don't know. You get, as a promoted club, if you're lucky, you get more than one season in the Premier League. If you're about standard right now, you get one season in the Premier League. You need to get as many points as you can, and they're doing all right. They've played Villa, they've played Spurs, they've played Arsenal, and they're on 6 points.
They're the only promoted side to have won a game so far. There you go. Everton 0, Newcastle 0. Didn't take place at 3 o'clock. That was 5:30. And Matt, you kind of touched on the talking point from this game. Was there anything else? There certainly wasn't another shot on target. So this was the penalty, which Anthony Gordon won and then attempted to convert, only to be confounded by his former teammate Jordan Pickford. It looked like Anthony Gordon tried to confound Pickford himself by saying left to him.
He was doing his whole process thing, wasn't he? It's the talking point of the game and the talking point after the game as well, because I see that Everton tweeted this morning a very strange...
What did they
it was
put?
a clip of the game with an image imposed of it of a tweet from somebody called Carmel saying, wish they'd placed the buzzer from half-time when the penalty was saved. Just seems like a bit of a needless dig, and Jamie Carragher had not responded, had not taken it too kindly, and kind of quoted it saying, "Yeah, somebody who wanted to leave because you were a mess and helped keep you up, and then made you £40 million." And it did feel a bit unnecessary to kind of rub salt in like that to the poor fella. But hey,
Newcastle didn't have a shot on target after that penalty saved by Jordan Pickford, which is a good save, no? Or was it just a bad penalty?
Bit of both.
Yeah, a bit of both.
Bit of both. All right. Jared Brantwaite's out again, injured. How long is that going to be? He's only just come back, of course. His return last weekend was seen as key in Everton getting their first win. How long's he out for? I go to
They've
our
not
medical.
said yet.
No idea?
No, they've
idea
not
yet.
said yet.
Okay. They do
we'll
have
have
some.
to Branthwaite.
Very
Sorry.
nice, Matt. No. On that note, and with a heads up that Everton's next 3 games after the international break are the enticing-looking Ipswich, Fulham, and Southampton. I think we've reached pretty much the end of our roundup of match day 7. That's how we head into the international break. Anything you want to add, guys?
It's a pretty good weekend, really, despite the
Was it?
three
Yeah.
3 TV games being not great of the 4. It's entertaining.
Lovely.
Shame there's an international break, really.
Is it, though?
I'm not ready for it.
England, Greece?
England, Finland.
England, Finland.
Who have San Marino got? That's what I want to know. Gibraltar.
They have, haven't they?
That's the big one.
They have. Very good. We'll be touching on some of those international football topics in Thursday's Totally Football show. So do join us for that. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, there is the Tuesday show. We'll be rounding up what everybody got up to around the continent this weekend with all the usual fellas on Tuesday afternoon. For now, though, many thanks to Tim, to Matt, and to Daniel. Hope we didn't offend anybody. But do let us know if we did. Also, thanks to Liam and producer Charlie in the booth. And you, if you watch on YouTube, or even if you're just listening at home. We'll be back soon. Hopefully you'll be there too. For now, from all of us here, it's goodbye. Hurrah!